I thought the hardest part of signing the lease for my quiet Lark Hill townhouse would be the terrifying silence of living alone. I had spent months scraping together $3,950, locking it away just to feel safe. But safety is fragile when your mother knows your passwords. 2 days before rent was due, I checked my balance and realized the woman who gave me life had just decided to ruin it. The pen felt heavier than it looked. It was a sleek, black rollerball that belonged to the desk of Carson Vale, a man who wore sweaters that cost more than my first car and who looked at lease agreements with the same dispassionate focus a surgeon might give a chart. I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap to hide the way my thumbs were digging into my palms. "Here's the lease," Carson said, sliding the thick document across the mahogany surface. I stared at the paper. It was the physical manifestation of 3 years of suffocating discipline. I was 33 years old. Most people my age in Lark Hill, Washington, were looking at mortgages or upgrading to homes with 2-car garages. I was just trying to secure a rental that didn't smell like mildew and didn't have a landlord who accepted cash only because he was dodging the IRS. This townhouse was perfect. It was on the quiet side of town, away from the industrial noise of the depot and, more importantly, a 20-minute drive from the duplex where my mother lived. It had cream-colored walls, a gas fireplace, and a lock on the front door that looked like it could actually stop a shoulder ram. I picked up the pen. The ink flowed smoothly as I signed Bella Morgan on the bottom line of page 12. "First month and security deposit have cleared," Carson said. Checking his monitor, "You are all set. Bella, keys are in the envelope." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded thin, stretched tight over a drum of anxiety I couldn't quite silence. I walked out to my sedan, a 10-year-old Toyota that I kept immaculately clean, and sat in the driver's seat for a long time. I gripped the steering wheel. I had done it. I had rebuilt my credit score from the ashes of my 20s. I had saved every spare dollar, skipping lunch breaks and working overtime at the logistics firm. To build a buffer, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I needed to see it again. There it was. My primary checking account had the usual operating funds, but below it sat the new sub-account I had created specifically for this moment. I had named it Lark Hill Rent. The balance read $3,950. It was exactly enough for the next month of rent plus a small cushion for utilities. I had set up the auto-pay just that morning. It was a closed loop, a sealed system. Money went in from my paycheck. Money went out to Carson Vale. I did not call my mother. That was the rule I had given myself. Marlene Morgan, my mother, had a sixth sense for success. She could smell stability like a shark smells blood in the water. If I told her I had signed a lease on a townhouse with a fireplace, she would hear Bella has surplus. She would hear Bella has enough to share. I put the phone away and drove to the new place. The rain had started. A classic Washington drizzle that turned the asphalt slick and gray. When I unlocked the front door of the townhouse, the silence inside was profound. It didn't smell like anyone else's dinner. It didn't smell like stale cigarettes or heavy perfume. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I unpacked my first box in the kitchen. Just plates and cups. I was humming. For the first time in years, I felt like the ground beneath my feet was solid rock, not shifting sand. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the name, Mom. I stared at it. The vibration rattled against the granite countertop. My stomach did that familiar flip, a conditioned response honed over 3 decades. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the guilt was faster than my logic. Marlene didn't call just to chat. There was always a reason. I swiped green. "Hey, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Bella," she said. Her voice was warm, dripping with a sweetness that I hadn't heard in months. It was the voice she used when she was talking to her church friends or when she was trying to charm a customer service representative. "I was just sitting here looking at that old photo of you from high school graduation." She said, "You know the one? With the blue sash?" I leaned against the counter, my guard remaining up but lowering slightly. Inch by inch, "I know the one. You looked so beautiful," she said. "I was just thinking about how hard you work. I know I don't say it enough. baby. But I'm so proud of you. You have really turned things around. The tightness in my chest, the iron band that had been there since I signed the lease, loosened. It was pathetic how much I still wanted to hear that. I was a grown woman, a manager at a logistics company, capable of firing people and negotiating contracts, yet one compliment from Marlene could turn me into a needy child. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "That means a lot. I really mean it." She said, "I know I have been a lot to handle sometimes, but I look at you and I see my greatest accomplishment." I closed my eyes. I didn't tell her about the townhouse. I didn't tell her about the $3,950 sitting in the account, but I let myself believe, just for a moment, that she was calling simply because she loved me. We talked for 10 minutes. She didn't ask for money. She didn't complain about her car or her health or the neighbors. She just talked. When we hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe things were changing. Maybe my stability was helping her stabilize too, purely by osmosis. 2 days passed. I spent them moving small things, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because I hadn't bought a bed frame yet. I felt rich. I felt secure. On Tuesday morning, 2 days before the rent was scheduled to draft, I sat down with my coffee to do a final check. I was obsessive about my finances now. I checked my accounts every morning, a ritual to ward off the poverty demons of my past. I logged in. Face ID verified. The dashboard loaded. I looked at the Larkhill rent sub-account. My coffee cup halted halfway to my mouth. The balance did not say $3,950. It said $4.12. I blinked. I actually rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a glitch, a display error, a pixel malfunction. I refreshed the page. The little loading circle spun and spun, mocking me, before settling back on the same number. $4. The air left the room. The fresh paint smell suddenly made me nauseous. I tapped on the transaction history, my finger trembling so hard, I missed the icon twice. There was one single transaction, dated late last night. Transfer to M. Halstead. XAX, ending in 4492. Amount, $3,945. M. Halstead. Marlene Halstead. My mother used her maiden name on her primary credit union account. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. It wasn't a hack. It wasn't a stranger in Russia or a skimmer at a gas station. It was a transfer. An authorized transfer. The warmth from her phone call 2 days ago came rushing back, but now it felt cold. Slimy. "I am so proud of you." She hadn't been calling to reconnect. She had been taking my temperature. She had been checking to see if I was suspicious, if I was watching. She had been smoothing the waters before she dropped the stone. I stood up. The chair screeched against the floor. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I went into a mode that was colder and sharper than anger. It was the survival instinct of someone who realizes the predator is already inside the cave. I grabbed my keys. The drive to Marlene's duplex usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 15. I drove with the radio off, the silence of the car amplifying the rushing blood in my ears. Larkhill is a city of divides. My new townhouse was on the hill, where the trees were trimmed and the streets were swept. Marlene lived in the bottoms, a flat sprawl of duplexes and auto body shops where the zoning laws were suggestions rather than rules. I pulled up to her curb. Her blinds were drawn. Her car, a beat-up sedan that always needed a muffler, was in the driveway. She was home. I walked up the cracked concrete path. I didn't knock. I had a key, a relic from when she had surgery 2 years ago and needed me to bring her groceries. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me instantly. Lavender air freshener trying to mask the smell of old dust and humidity. The television was on, a daytime talk show blaring at high volume. Marlene was sitting on her beige recliner. She was wearing her floral housecoat. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised. She didn't jump. She looked like she had been waiting. Her eyes were red, rimmed with pink, the way they got when she had been crying or when she wanted you to think she had been crying. She muted the TV, but didn't turn it off. "Bella," she said. Her voice was small. I stood in the entryway, my phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. "Where is it?" I asked. She pulled the edges of her housecoat together. "I know," she said. "I know what it looks like. It looks like theft." I said, "It looks like you went into my account and took nearly $4,000. I borrowed it," she said quickly, the words tumbling out as if she had practiced them in front of a mirror. "It is just a borrow. Bella, I have a check coming, a settlement check. You know about the car accident thing? It is coming on Friday, I swear. I just needed to bridge the gap." "Friday," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Friday. I will put it all back. Every single dollar, plus extra. I will give you $50 extra for the trouble." I walked further into the room. The air felt thick. "You took my rent money. Marlene, do you understand what that money was for? It was an emergency," she said, her voice rising, gaining that defensive edge I knew so well. "A one-time emergency. They were going to garnish my wages. Bella, if they garnish my wages, I lose my job. If I lose my job, I lose this house. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice." I said, "You could have asked me." She looked away. "I couldn't ask. You would have said no. You are so rigid with your money lately." "Rigid." She called survival rigid. I held up the phone. "How did you even do it?" "I changed my passwords. I changed everything." She picked at a loose thread on the arm of the recliner. "It was the old link." She mumbled, "From when I helped you move back from Seattle, remember? You added me to that profile so I could transfer you the deposit money. I checked to see if it was still active." She checked. She had actively gone looking for a back door. "Transfer it back." I said, "Right now, I can't," she whispered. "Why not?" "It is gone." She said, "I paid the lien. It cleared this morning." I felt my knees go weak. I had to sit down on the edge of her sofa. The fabric was scratchy. "Marlene," I said, and my voice broke. "I have to pay rent in 2 days. 2 days. If that payment bounces, I lose the lease. It is in the contract. Carson Vale has a strict first-month clause. If the first payment fails, the lease is void, and I am out. I will be homeless." Marlene waved a hand dismissively, as if I were being dramatic. "Oh, Bella, stop. You won't be homeless. You can always stay here." I looked around the dark living room, the clutter of magazines, the walls that seemed to close in. I couldn't breathe. "I don't want to stay here." I said, "I signed a legal document, so tell him it was a bank error," she said. She leaned forward, her eyes wide with sudden intensity. "Just call him. Tell him the bank froze the funds by mistake. Landlords buy that stuff all the time. Just buy me until Friday. Please. Bella, you want me to lie?" I said, "I want you to help your mother," she snapped. The tears vanished, replaced by a flash of anger. "I sacrificed everything for you. I worked double shifts. I went without new clothes for 10 years so you could have braces. And now you are standing here acting like I'm a criminal because I had an emergency? You stole from me." I said, "I borrowed," she shouted. "It wasn't borrowing. You didn't ask." I stood up. The panic was clawing at my throat. I couldn't be here. The gravity of her chaos was too strong. If I stayed, I would get pulled into her orbit, and I would end up sitting on this beige couch believing that I was the one who was wrong. "I am leaving." I said, "Bella, don't walk out." She called after me. "Bella." I slammed the door. I got into my car and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition on the first try. I didn't go back to the townhouse immediately. I drove to a park overlooking the river and parked in the furthest spot. I turned off the engine and stared at the gray water. $3,950. It was gone. I pulled out a notebook from my purse. I needed a plan. I was a manager. I solved logistics problems for a living. I could solve this. Option 1. Short-term loan. I checked my credit union app. Because of the debt I now technically had, even though it was theft. My ratio was skewed. I could apply, but approval would take 3 to 5 days. I didn't have 5 days. I had 48 hours. Option 2. Sell things. I looked at my car. It was worth maybe $2,000 on a quick sale, but I needed it to get to work. My laptop? $300. My jewelry? I had sold the good stuff years ago during the last crisis. Option 3. Ask my boss. I imagined walking into Mr. Henderson's office. Hey, I know I just started this new role, but can I have an advance of $4,000 because my mother stole my money? No. It was humiliating. It would mark me as unstable, a liability. In the corporate world, people with messy personal lives were seen as risks. Option 4. Tell Carson Vale the truth. I replayed the scene in my head. Carson's cold eyes, the lease agreement, strict adherence to payment schedule. If I told him my mother stole the money, he wouldn't see a victim. He would see drama. He would see a tenant who brought baggage to his doorstep. He would cancel the lease to save himself the headache. Marlene's voice looped in my head. Just tell him it was a bank error. I couldn't do it. I couldn't start my new life with a lie. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank's fraud department. I needed to know exactly how this happened. I needed to hear it from a stranger. State Bank of Larkhill. This is David, the voice said. Hi, David, I said. I need to inquire about a transfer that happened on my account last night. I didn't authorize it. One moment. Miss Morgan, let me look at that. I heard the clicking of keys. Okay, I see the transfer to a Marlene Halstead. You are saying you did not initiate this? No, I said, I did not. Okay, looking at the logs here. It shows the transfer was initiated from a device labeled Marlene's iPad, and it was authorized using a shared access permission that was established. Let's see. 4 years ago. 4 years ago. I closed my eyes. I remembered. I had been 29. I had just broken up with a boyfriend who had kicked me out. I was staying on Marlene's couch. I had added her to my account so she could transfer me grocery money while I was looking for work. I thought I had removed her when I moved out. I thought I had unlinked everything. It says here the permission level was household member, full access. David said, it was never revoked. It wasn't a hack. I whispered, technically. No, David said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming careful. The system sees this as a valid transfer between linked parties. If you want to dispute it as fraud, we can open a case, but because it was a trusted device and an existing permission, the investigation will take up to 90 days, and we cannot reverse the funds immediately. 90 days. Thank you. David, I said. I hung up. The investigation wouldn't save me. The police wouldn't save me in time. Marlene knew this. She knew the system better than I did. She knew that by the time any authority looked at this, the damage would be done, or she would have come up with some new story to explain it away. I sat in the car as the sun went down. The park lights flickered on. I had one option left, the nuclear option. I had a small emergency savings fund in a completely different bank, an online high-yield account I used for medical deductibles. It had $1,200 in it. That left me $2,750 short. I opened a browser tab on my phone and typed in the name of a lending company I had seen on late-night TV. The kind that didn't ask questions. The kind that charged interest rates that should be illegal. QuickBridge Cash. I filled out the application. My thumb hovered over the terms and conditions. A PR. 29.99%. Origination fee. $150. I felt sick. Physically sick. I was undoing 3 years of progress in 3 minutes. I was signing myself up for months of crushing payments. I was digging a hole to fill a hole, but I saw the townhouse. I saw the fireplace. I saw the door that locked. I clicked Submit. Approved. Funds will be wired within 24 hours. I transferred the $1,200 from my emergency fund. I set up the wire for the loan. By tomorrow afternoon, the money would be in the rent-only account, just in time for the auto-pay to catch it. I drove home to the townhouse. It was dark. I hadn't bought lamps yet. I walked into the kitchen and sat down on the floor, leaning my back against the cabinet. The hard tile was cold against my legs. I checked my email. Loan confirmation. $2,800. I had paid the rent. I had saved the lease. Carson Vale would never know. But as I sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, I realized the money wasn't the point. Marlene didn't just want the cash. If she just wanted cash, she would have asked. She would have begged. She took it because she could. She took it to remind me that no matter how far I moved, no matter how many leases I signed or credit points I earned, I was still tethered to her. She had reached into my life, past my boundaries, past my locks, and touched the one thing I was proudest of. She didn't just steal $3,950. She stole the safety. I looked at the phone in my hand. I opened the banking app again. I went to the settings. I found the linked profile for Mag Halstead. I didn't just delete it. I took a screenshot of it. Then I deleted it. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the empty kitchen. I wasn't crying. I was done crying. Marlene had said she would pay me back by Friday. I knew she wouldn't. I knew there was no settlement check. But she was right about one thing. She was going to pay me back. I just didn't know how yet. I stood up, my legs stiff. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights of Larkhill. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a war, and the first battle had just cost me everything I had. I went to the front door and threw the deadbolt. It made a heavy, solid thunk. I am not going back. I said to the empty room. I turned off the light. The darkness felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. Part 1 ended with me standing in the dark, but my mind was already racing to the morning. I had to go to the bank. I had to see the paper trail. I had to see the proof in black and white ink, not just pixels, because if I was going to fight Marlene, I couldn't use memories. Memories were slippery. Marlene could rewrite memories. I needed evidence. I went to sleep on my mattress on the floor, and for the first time in my life, I didn't dream of falling. I dreamed of paperwork. I dreamed of receipts. I dreamed of a gavel coming down, loud and final, cutting the cord that had been wrapped around my neck since the day I was born. The fluorescent lights of the State Bank of Larkhill hummed with a frequency that seemed to vibrate directly against my molars. I sat in a faux leather chair that was peeling at the armrest, watching a printer spit out pages. Chug, chug, pause, chug, chug, pause. It was a rhythmic, mechanical sound that felt like a countdown. Across the desk, a personal banker named Sarah, young, with chipped nail polish and tired eyes, watched the paper stack grow. She didn't look at me. People in banking usually avoided eye contact when the news was bad. "There is a lot here, Ms. Morgan," Sarah said, finally reaching for the stack. She stapled the corner with a sharp clack. I reached for the document. It was thick, heavier than a bank statement should be. I asked for a full audit trail of the last 18 months. I said, keeping my voice level, I need to see every transaction involving the linked profile, not just the big one from Monday, everything. Sarah slid the packet toward me. I opened it. The entry from Monday was there at the top, bold and ugly. Transfer to M. Halstead, $3,945. But below it, the list went on and on. February 12th. Transfer to M. Halstead, $25. February 19th. Transfer to M. Halstead, $40. March 3rd. Transfer to M. Halstead, $15. I ran my finger down the column. The amounts were small, trivial, almost, the kind of amounts that vanish into the noise of daily life. A gas tank fill-up, a grocery run, a takeout order. They were designed to be invisible. They were camouflaged against my own spending habits. I flipped the page. November, $50. December, $80. I did the math in my head, my logistics brain taking over the emotional shock. Over the last year, Marlene hadn't just taken the rent money. She had been skimming. She had been siphoning off my income in bite-sized pieces, treating my checking account like a petty cash drawer. The total at the bottom of the audit wasn't just the rent money. It was over $5,000 in total transfers. I felt a cold flush spread across the back of my neck. This wasn't panic. Panic is hot and frantic. This was clarity. Cold, jagged clarity. Marlene hadn't panicked on Monday. She hadn't faced a sudden emergency and made a desperate, one-time choice. She had simply increased the volume on a channel she had been broadcasting on for years. The rent money wasn't a robbery. It was a withdrawal from a bank she believed she owned. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" Sarah asked gently. "No," I said. I stood up, clutching the papers. This is exactly what I needed. I drove straight to the duplex. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky a bruised purple color. The puddles in Marlene's driveway were oil-slicked rainbows. I didn't park on the street this time. I pulled right into the driveway, blocking her in. When I walked in, she was in the kitchen, making tea. The kettle was whistling. It was a domestic, cozy sound that made me want to scream. She turned, holding a mug that said, "World's Best Grandma," a gift from my cousin's kid, and smiled tentatively. "Bella," she said, "I didn't think you would be coming by. Did you fix it with the landlord?" I didn't answer. I dropped the stack of papers on the kitchen table. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" she asked, looking at the pile but not touching it. I sat down. "Sit," I said. She hesitated, then sat opposite me, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "That is an audit trail," I said. "It goes back 18 months. Marlene's eyes flickered to the paper, then back to me. So, I said, pointing to the columns. "You didn't just borrow the rent money. Mom, you have been taking money every week. $20 here, $50 there. You have been skimming from me since I got the promotion at the logistics firm, since I started making real money." She took a sip of tea. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed, like I was bringing up a chore she had forgotten to do. "I didn't think you would notice." She said, "That is not the point." I said, "The point is that you stole it." "I didn't steal it," she snapped, setting the mug down hard enough to slosh tea onto the table. "I helped myself. There is a difference." "Bella, explain the difference to me." I said, "I really want to know. You always have it together," she said, gesturing at me with a wet hand. "Look at you. You have a salary. You have benefits. You buy those expensive coffees. You never need anything. Meanwhile, I am here scraping by on disability and that part-time filing job. Do you know how much insulin costs? Do you know how much the heating bill was last month?" "So you just took it?" I asked, without asking. "If I asked, you would have given me a lecture," she said. "You would have wanted to see a budget. You would have made me feel small. This way. It was just easier. You didn't miss it. You didn't even know it was gone until now. So what was the harm?" I stared at her. The logic was breathtaking. In her mind, my solvency was a communal resource. My hard work wasn't mine. It was a surplus she was entitled to skim because she was the mother and I was the daughter, and in her world, the flow of resources only went one way. "The harm," I said, my voice trembling, "is that I almost lost my home 2 days ago. The harm is that I had to take out a predatory loan to cover the hole you dug." She waved a hand. "You figured it out. You always figure it out. That is your gift. Bella, you are a survivor. Like me. I am not like you." I said. I pulled a second document from my bag. I had typed it up in the car on my laptop before coming in. It was simple, crude, legally speaking, but clear. "I am not going to call the police," I said. She let out a breath she had been holding. "Well, of course not. We are family. But things are changing," I continued. I slid the paper toward her. "This is a repayment agreement. You are going to pay me back every cent. The $5,000. I don't have $5,000. Bella, then you will pay me in installments." I said, $200 a month, until it is gone. "And more importantly, you are going to sign a revocation form at the bank with me. We are removing your name from everything. No more linked accounts. No more emergency access. No more trusted device status." She looked at the paper. It was just a piece of printer paper with my typed terms. But she looked at it like it was a death warrant. "You are cutting me off?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I am protecting myself," I said. She looked at me, searching for a crack. She was looking for the guilt. She was looking for the daughter who wanted to be praised. But I was tired. I was $3,000 in debt to a shark loan company. And I was just plain tired. Fine, she said abruptly. She grabbed a pen from the fruit bowl and scribbled her name on the bottom of the paper. She didn't even read the terms. Fine, she repeated, sliding it back. I will pay you. $200 a month. Whatever. And we can go to the bank whenever you want. I blinked. The surrender was too fast. There was no crying, no wailing about how I was abandoning her. She was smiling, a tight, thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Is that it? She asked. Are we good? Can I finish my tea? We go to the bank on Friday, I said, taking the paper. At 9 a.m. Do not be late. I will be there, she said. She picked up her mug. I walked out of the house feeling heavier than when I went in. Marlene had agreed, but she hadn't surrendered. I knew that smile. That was the smile she wore when she had figured out a way to cheat the system. It was the smile of someone who had found a loophole I hadn't seen yet. The next day at work, the stress began to leak out. I was a logistics manager. My job was control. I managed shipping lanes, driver schedules, and warehouse inventory. I was paid to keep chaos in a box, but at 10 a.m, when a driver called to say he was stuck in traffic on I-5 and would be late for a drop-off, I snapped. I didn't just tell him to reroute. I yelled, I don't care about the traffic. I shouted into my headset. The contract has a delivery window. If you miss the window, we eat the penalty. Just figure it out. I slammed the headset down. The entire open-plan office went quiet. Heads ducked behind monitors. I sat there, breathing hard, my hands shaking. This wasn't me. I didn't yell at drivers. I was the calm one. I was the one who solved problems with spreadsheets. Not volume. A chair rolled up beside me. Coffee, a voice said. I looked up. It was Nia Hartwell. Nia was my best friend and the only person in the office who knew that my family emergency days were actually mom crisis days. She placed a steaming cup of dark roast on my desk. You are vibrating, she said softly. And you just screamed at Miller. Miller is the nicest driver we have. He brings donuts. I know, I whispered. I rubbed my temples. I am sorry. Come on, Nia said. Conference room B. Now. She led me into the small glass-walled room and closed the door. She didn't sit down. She leaned against the whiteboard and crossed her arms. Spill it, she said. You have been wearing the same shirt for 2 days. Your eyes look like road maps. What did Marlene do? I flinched. Was it that obvious? She took my rent money, I said. Nia's face didn't change. She nodded. As if I had said, it's raining outside. How much? All of it, I said. $3,950. Nia let out a low whistle. That is a new record, even for her. I looked at the table. She didn't just take it. She has been taking small amounts for a year. I found the records, and when I confronted her, Nia, she acted like it was her allowance. She said I didn't need it. Nia pulled out a chair and sat down. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her hand was warm and steady. Bella, she said, you know this isn't normal, right? I nodded. I know. Do you? Nia pressed. Because you are saying it like you are reporting a shipping delay. Oh, well, the port is backed up, and my mother committed grand larceny. You are detaching. I have to detach, I said. If I feel it, I will fall apart, and I can't fall apart. I have a lease. I have a loan I have to pay back. You need a lawyer, Nia said. I shook my head. I can't sue my mother. Why not? Nia asked. If a stranger walked into your house and took $4 grand, would you sue them? Would you call the cops? Yes, but nothing. Nia said, DNA isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. She stole from you, and if you let her get away with it, she will do it again. You know she will. I looked at Nia. She was right. The normality of it was the terrifying part. I had spent my whole life calibrating my reactions to Marlene's chaos, treating her felonies like misdemeanors and her cruelty like eccentricity. I had normalized the abuse to survive it. I am handling it. I said, pulling my hand away. We are going to the bank on Friday to revoke her access. Good, Nia said. But watch your back. Bella. Marlene is like water. She finds the cracks. That afternoon, I found the crack. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a spreadsheet of fuel surcharges. When my phone buzzed, it was a notification from Credit Karma. New inquiry detected. I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything. I had frozen my main credit reports the night before. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. I had been thorough. I opened the app. The inquiry wasn't on the big three. It was a soft pull, turned into a hard pull, on a smaller secondary consumer reporting agency, one of those data aggregators that landlords and payday lenders use. Inquiry by Northstone Family Solutions. Date: today. My stomach dropped. Northstone. I had never heard of them. It sounded like a rehab center or a cult. I Googled the name. The website that popped up was generic. Stock photos of happy families holding hands in meadows. Lots of blue and white branding. Financial wellness, debt consolidation, family restoration. I searched for their number and dialed. Northstone Family Solutions. How can we bless your day? A woman's voice answered. She sounded too cheerful, almost manic. Hi, I said. I am calling because I see an inquiry on my credit report from your company. I didn't apply for anything. One moment. Let me pull you up. Name? Bella Morgan. I heard typing. Ah, yes, Ms. Morgan, the woman said. I see you right here. You are listed on the Halstead file. The Halstead file? My mother's file? I asked. Why am I on my mother's file? Well, you are the household financial partner, she said. The co-applicant. Marlene indicated that you would be the primary guarantor for the restructuring program. The room spun. I gripped the edge of my desk. I didn't agree to that. I said, I didn't sign anything. Oh, the electronic signature is on file, the woman said breezily. It was signed yesterday. We are just waiting for the income verification documents to finalize the consolidation loan. It is a great program. Ms. Morgan, it is going to bundle all those high-interest debts into one manageable payment. Cancel it. I said, excuse me? Cancel it. Right now. I am not a partner. I am not a guarantor. That signature is a forgery. There was a pause. The cheerful voice dropped a few degrees. Ms. Morgan, canceling a structured agreement in the processing phase requires a written request from the primary applicant. That would be Marlene. I am telling you it is fraud, I said, my voice rising. We take these allegations seriously, the woman said, sounding like she was reading from a script. However, since you are listed as a household partner, we assume familial consent. If you wish to dispute the validity, you will need to submit a fraud packet. But that will freeze the funds. Marlene was very clear that these funds were urgent. I hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. Household financial partner. This wasn't just skimming. This wasn't just stealing rent money. Marlene was trying to leverage my credit score, the score I had spent 3 years rebuilding brick by brick, to secure a loan for herself. She was using my identity as collateral. Nia was right. I needed a lawyer. Joel Kincaid's office was not in a glass tower. It was in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese bakery. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemongrass and photocopier toner. Joel himself was a man in his 50s, with messy gray hair and a tie that was slightly askew. He looked like a man who spent a lot of time arguing with insurance companies. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. He looked at the bank audit. He looked at the screenshot of the Northstone inquiry. He took notes on a yellow legal pad. Okay, he said, leaning back in his chair. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Here is the situation. Bella, your mother has committed identity theft, wire fraud, forgery. These are felonies. I know. I said, but you don't want to put her in jail, do you? I hesitated. I thought about the jail cells in Larkhill. I thought about Marlene in an orange jumpsuit. Despite everything, despite the rage burning in my gut, I couldn't do it. Not yet. No. I said, I just want my life back. I want my money back. And I want her to stop. Joel nodded. He had seen this before. The family trap. Okay, he said. We have civil options. First, we stop the bleeding. We send a cease and desist to Northstone immediately, flagging the application as fraudulent. That kills the loan. Second, we file for an injunctive relief, a civil restraining order. Not the kind where she can't come within 100 feet of you, though we could ask for that, but a financial restraining order. It bars her from using your name, accessing your accounts, or incurring debt on your behalf. If she violates it, then it becomes criminal, and the choice is out of your hands. What about the money she took? I asked. The $5,000? We sue her. Joel said simply. Small claims court or civil court. Depending on the final total, we get a judgment. We can garnish her wages, levy her bank accounts. She doesn't have any money. I said, she is broke. She has an income. Joel said, disability, part-time work. It is protected to a degree, but a judgment follows her. It ruins her credit. Not yours. It forces accountability. And most importantly, it creates a public record that says Bella Morgan is not responsible for Marlene Halstead's mess. He looked at me over his glasses. But Bella, you have to be ready. When you serve a mother with a lawsuit, you break the family contract. She will fight dirty. She will use guilt. She will use other family members. Are you ready for that? I thought about the $4.12 in my account. I thought about the world's best grandma mug. Draw it up, I said. Friday morning, 9 a.m. I stood in the lobby of the State Bank of Larkhill. The air conditioning was on full blast. I was wearing my work blazer, trying to look like a professional, trying to hide the fact that I was vibrating with adrenaline. Marlene was late. Of course she was late. At 9:15. The glass doors slid open. Marlene breezed in. She was wearing a scarf I had bought her for Christmas and large sunglasses. She looked like she was arriving for a brunch, not a revocation of rights. Sorry, she announced to the empty lobby. Traffic was a nightmare. She walked up to me and tried to kiss my cheek. I stepped back. Let's just get this done, I said. I led her to the desk. Sarah, the banker, was waiting. She looked uncomfortable. She knew what was happening. Marlene sat down and immediately turned on the charm. Hi there. Marlene beamed at Sarah. You have lovely hair, just so thick and shiny. I used to have hair like that before the stress got to me. Being a mother, you know? It takes it out of you. Sarah offered a polite, tight smile. Thank you. Mrs. Halstead, we are here to process the revocation of access for the account ending in 4492. Right, Marlene said, waving a hand. The paperwork. Bella is being so serious about all this. It was just a little mix-up. Really, a misunderstanding between mother and daughter. She reached across the desk and patted Sarah's hand. Sarah flinched. Actually, Marlene said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, do we really need to do the full revocation? It is so permanent, isn't it? What if there is an emergency? What if Bella gets into an accident and needs me to transfer funds for her medical care? Can't we just downgrade the access? Make it view only or something? I stared at Marlene. She was doing it right in front of me. She was trying to negotiate a window to be left open. No, I said. Sarah looked at me, then back to Marlene. Ms. Morgan is the primary account holder. Her request is for full revocation. Marlene's smile faltered. She turned to me. Bella, be reasonable. What if you get sick? I will handle it, I said. Sign the paper. Mom. Marlene looked at the document Sarah had placed in front of her. Revocation of third-party authorization. She picked up the pen. She held it for a long time. Then she looked up at Sarah. Her eyes suddenly wet. She is so hard on me, Marlene sniffed. I raised her on my own. You know, I gave her everything. And now that she has made it big, she treats me like a nuisance. It breaks a mother's heart. Sarah didn't take the bait. She pointed to the signature line. Sign here, please. Marlene's face hardened. The tragic mother mask vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp. She scribbled her name aggressively, the pen tearing through the paper slightly. There, she snapped. Happy? She stood up. Sarah processed the form, stamping it with a loud thud. "It is done," Sarah said. "Ms. Halstead, you no longer have access to any accounts at this institution." Marlene didn't thank her. She turned and marched toward the exit. I followed her. In the lobby, near the ATM. She spun around. The transition was terrifying. She wasn't the sweet old lady anymore. She was the woman who had terrorized my childhood with her unpredictable moods. "You think you are so smart," she hissed. Her voice was low, venomous. "You think because you have a little townhouse and a little degree that you are better than me?" I didn't say that. I said, "You are selfish," she said. "Cold and selfish. You hoard your money while your family drowns." I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. She was losing control. For the first time, the Bank of Bella was truly closed. "I am not hoarding," I said. "I am surviving. You almost got me evicted." "Mom, evicted?" she scoffed. "You always overdramatize. You would have figured it out. You always do." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell her perfume, cloying and sweet. "You know who you remind me of?" she whispered. "Standing there in your cheap blazer with that look on your face?" I braced myself. "You are turning into your father," she said. The air left my lungs. My father was a ghost story in our house. He was the villain of every narrative Marlene told. The man who abandoned us. The man who was cold, unfeeling, and cruel. To be compared to him was the ultimate insult in the lexicon of Marlene. It was her nuclear weapon. I froze. He counted pennies too. She said, smiling cruelly, "He cared more about his bank account than his own flesh and blood. And look where he ended up. Alone. Just like you are going to be." She turned and walked out the automatic doors. I stood there in the lobby. The silence was ringing in my ears. "You are turning into your father." For years. That sentence would have crushed me. It would have sent me spiraling, begging for her forgiveness, trying to prove I wasn't him. But as I watched her get into her rusted sedan and drive away, I felt something else. I felt relief, because if I was my father, then I wasn't her. And right now, that was the only victory that mattered. That night, my townhouse felt like a bunker. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a shredder, and a pot of coffee. The windows were dark. The only light came from the screen. I was systematically scrubbing my life. I changed my email password to a string of random characters 20 digits long. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. Bank, email, social media, utilities. I called the credit bureaus and placed a permanent freeze on my files. No one, not Northstone, not Marlene, not even me, could open a new line of credit without a PIN code that only I knew. I logged into the Northstone portal. I had guessed the password Marlene used. It was my birthday, and downloaded every document before they could lock me out. I saw the loan application. I saw the fake income statements she had uploaded, claiming I made double my actual salary. I saw the forged signature. I printed it all. Then I logged out and changed that password too. I looked around my quiet living room. There were still boxes to unpack. The walls were still bare, but the air felt different. For 33 years, I had been Bella the daughter. I had been defined by my relationship to Marlene. I was her helper, her crutch, her retirement plan, her emotional support animal. My identity was porous, bleeding into hers whenever she needed something. Marlene didn't steal the money because she needed cash. She stole it because she didn't believe I had the right to separate assets. She didn't believe I had the right to a separate life. I looked at the stack of fresh, warm papers from the printer. Freezing my credit wasn't just a financial move, it was an existential one. I was drawing a line in the sand. On one side was Marlene and her chaos. On the other side was me. I was alone in the house. The silence was total. And for the first time since I signed the lease, I didn't feel terrified of the silence. I felt protected by it. I picked up my phone and texted Joel Kincaid. "It is done. File the papers." I put the phone down and walked to the window. The city lights of Larkhill twinkled below. Somewhere down there, in the dark, Marlene was probably realizing her passwords didn't work anymore. She was probably realizing that the father inside me wasn't just cold. He was closed for business. The kitchen table in my new townhouse had become a command center. I had pushed the placemats aside and covered the surface with a grid of spreadsheets I had printed at the office. My laptop hummed in the corner, displaying a pivot table that would have impressed my boss, Mr. Henderson. But this wasn't for logistics or shipping routes. This was an autopsy of my own financial life. I had spent the last 3 nights downloading CSV files from every bank account I had held in the last 5 years. I imported the data, categorized the transactions, and filtered for one specific variable: transfers to Marlene Halstead. When I stepped back and looked at the data visualized, the pattern was so clear it was nauseating. It looked like a heartbeat, a parasitic heartbeat. Every month, on the 3rd or the 4th, my paycheck would hit my account, and every month, on the 5th or the 6th, there would be a withdrawal. Sometimes it was small, $20, $40. Sometimes it was significant, $200. I cross-referenced the dates with a calendar I had reconstructed from memory and old emails. The withdrawals always spiked 3 days before Marlene's rent was due at the duplex. They tapered off in the middle of the month. Then they spiked again right around the time her utility bills were generated. I sat in the silence of my townhouse, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, and felt a cold realization settle in my gut. This wasn't impulsive. Marlene hadn't been borrowing money when she was short. She had built her entire monthly budget around the assumption that she had access to my income. I was a line item in her ledger. Bella's paycheck was just as much a part of her revenue stream as her disability check or her wages from the filing job. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was an annuity. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating against a stack of bank statements. Voicemail. Mom, it was the 4th one today. I hadn't answered any of them. I picked up the phone and pressed play, holding it away from my ear like it was radioactive. Bella. Marlene's voice filled the quiet kitchen. It was that soft, trembling tone she used when she wanted to be the victim. I know you are busy. I know you are upset about the bank thing. I made your favorite lasagna. I wanted to bring some by. We need to talk about this. Baby, you are blowing this out of proportion. Call me back so we can fix this like family. I deleted the message. Fix this like family. For 30 years, I thought that phrase meant forgiveness. I thought it meant unconditional love. Now, looking at the spreadsheets, I realized it meant something else entirely. Fixing it like family meant deleting the boundaries. It meant pretending the theft was a misunderstanding. It meant opening the door and letting the wolf back in because the wolf happened to share my DNA. I didn't call her back. The next morning, I had a meeting with Carson Vale. I had asked for the meeting under the guise of clarifying the guest parking rules. But the truth was, I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to make sure the rent payment, the one funded by the predatory bridge loan, had cleared and that my standing was secure. Carson met me in the leasing office. He was wearing a charcoal sweater and drinking an espresso. He looked effortlessly solvent. Everything is in order. Bella, he said, tapping his keyboard, your payment posted on the 1st. You are a model tenant so far. I exhaled. Thank you. Carson, I just wanted to be sure. The bank transfer was a little complicated this month. He nodded, not really listening, then paused. He looked at a sticky note attached to my file folder. Oh, actually, there is one thing, he said. My heart hammered against my ribs. What is it? We received a call yesterday, he said, from a woman claiming to be your emergency contact. A Mrs. Halstead? My hands went cold. I had listed Marlene as my emergency contact on the application months ago. Before the theft, I had forgotten to remove her from the lease paperwork. What did she want? I asked. She was asking about the lease terms, Carson said, frowning slightly. Specifically, she wanted to know if the lease allowed for long-term guests. She said something about a family medical situation and wanted to verify if the second bedroom occupancy would trigger a rent increase. The room spun. Long-term guests. Second bedroom. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was planning a move. She was scouting my home as her lifeboat. What did you tell her? I managed to ask. I told her we don't discuss lease specifics with anyone but the leaseholder. Carson said, I told her if there were changes to the occupancy, you would need to come in personally. She seemed persistent. She asked if I had a spare key on file in case she needed to get in to check on you. Did you give it to her? The question came out sharper than I intended. Carson looked offended. Absolutely not. That is a security violation. I told her to contact you directly. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. Please remove her. I said, remove her as my emergency contact immediately. I will provide a new name. Do not speak to her again. If she calls, tell her nothing. Carson typed quickly. Done. Is everything okay? Bella? It is fine, I said, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. Just a misunderstanding. I walked back to my car, the rage building in my chest like steam pressure. She called my landlord. She tried to get a key. She was asking about moving in. I sat in the driver's seat and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. Bella. Oh, thank God. I have been so worried. Did you call Carson Vale? I asked. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how she was. There was a pause, a hesitation that lasted 2 seconds too long. Who? She asked innocently. My landlord. Marlene, did you call my landlord and ask about my spare bedroom? I called to check on you. She stammered. I was worried. Bella, you haven't answered my calls for 3 days. I thought something might have happened to you. I just wanted to make sure his office knew to call me if there was an emergency. You asked about long-term guests. I said, you asked if I had a spare key on file. I was just asking general questions, she cried. You have that big townhouse all to yourself. I just thought, if you ever needed help, or if we needed to be closer. I cut her off. You are not moving in with me. Mom, never. Bella, don't say never. Family helps family. Stop saying that word, I shouted. I was in the parking lot of the leasing office, screaming into my phone. Family doesn't call the landlord behind your back. Family doesn't steal $4,000. I was trying to help, she yelled back, her voice cracking. I knew you were stressed about the move. I was just trying to see if I could come stay for a few weeks, cook for you, help you get settled. And by the way, that pet policy he has is ridiculous. $200 for a cat deposit? You shouldn't have agreed to that. The silence that followed was absolute. I had never told her about the pet deposit. I didn't have a cat. I had looked at the pet addendum during the signing, but I had never mentioned it to her. You read my lease, I whispered. What? You know about the pet deposit? I said, I never told you that. You read my lease. How did you read my lease? I didn't. You must have mentioned it. No, I said, I didn't. You found it. Did you go through my email? Did you find the PDF? Bella, you are being paranoid. I hung up. I blocked her number. Then I drove to the nearest electronics store and bought a security camera for my front door. 2 days later. The letter came. It was a thick envelope addressed to Bella Morgan at my townhouse address. The return address was Northstone Family Solutions. I carried it inside and laid it on the kitchen table next to the stack of bank audits. I got a letter opener. Inside was a glossy brochure titled Pathways to Solvency and a cover letter. Dear Ms. Morgan, we are writing to follow up on the debt consolidation financial coaching package initiated by your household partner, Marlene Halstead. As the co-signer and guarantor, we wanted to welcome you to the Northstone family. Enclosed is your copy of the service agreement and the initial payment schedule. Please note that the first installment of $350 is due on the 15th. I looked at the payment schedule. $350 a month. For 5 years. That was over $20,000. I flipped to the service agreement. It was filled with buzzwords. Holistic wealth management, spiritual budget alignment, intergenerational asset healing, and there, on the last page, was the service location address. Service address, 442 Maple Street, Unit B, Marlene's duplex. I wasn't just a co-signer on a loan. I was paying for a service that was happening at her house. I grabbed my keys and the folder. I drove straight to Joel Kincaid's office. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist saw my face and buzzed me straight back. Joel was eating a sandwich at his desk. He put it down when he saw the Northstone letter. He read it in silence. He read the brochure. He read the fine print on the back of the agreement. "This isn't a bank," Joel said, taking off his glasses. "Northstone isn't a lender. They are a consultancy." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means they don't give you money," Joel said. "They take your money. They charge you a fee to negotiate your other debts. It is a debt settlement scam wrapped in religious language. They tell people to stop paying their creditors and pay Northstone instead. Northstone takes a huge cut, and eventually, maybe, they settle the debts. Usually, they just ruin your credit and keep the fees. And I'm signed up for it?" I asked. "According to this, yes," Joel said. He pointed to a line on the contract. "Household financial partner." He turned to his computer. "I am going to request the metadata for this signature. If they are a legitimate company, and that is a big if, they have to log the IP address where the electronic signature originated." He typed a draft email to Northstone's legal compliance department. He attached a scan of the letter. "We are going to demand the full digital audit trail," Joel said. "And we are going to tell them that if they try to draft a single cent from your account, we will sue them for unfair business practices under the Consumer Protection Act." "Do it," I said. The response came 48 hours later. Joel called me while I was at work. "I got the IP address," he said. "And? It traces back to a Comcast account registered to Marlene Halstead at 442 Maple Street." I closed my eyes. I was standing in the break room at the logistics firm. The coffee machine was gurgling. "She signed my name." I said. "She did." Joel said, "On February 2nd, at 10:45 in the morning. That was a Tuesday. I was at work." Joel cleared his throat. "Bella, this is grand larceny. This is identity theft. This is forgery. We have the smoking gun. We can file a police report today." I hesitated. The image of the jail cell returned. "Not the police." I said, "Not yet. Then we send the demand letter." Joel said, "We serve her officially. We put it on paper that she owes you the rent money, the fees, and that she has committed fraud. We give her 7 days to cure the debt, or we file the civil suit." "Send it," I said. The demand letter was a masterpiece of cold, legal aggression. It detailed the exact amount: $3,950 for the unauthorized transfer, $150 for the loan origination fee, $200 in interest, total demand, $4,300. It stated clearly that the Northstone contract was fraudulent and that any attempt to collect from me would result in immediate litigation. It was sent via certified mail. I tracked it online. Delivered, Thursday, 2 p.m. I waited. I expected a phone call. I expected screaming. I expected a text message blaming me for being cruel. I didn't expect the doorbell. It was Saturday morning. I was in my pajamas, drinking coffee and trying to read a book, trying to pretend my life wasn't a legal thriller. Ding dong. I looked at the monitor of the new security camera I had installed. Marlene was standing on my porch. She wasn't alone. She was holding 2 large paper grocery bags. She looked small on the screen. She was wearing her church coat, the nice wool one. I debated not opening the door. I could just sit here. I could call the police and say there was a trespasser, but the habit was too strong. The curiosity was too strong. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. But I kept the screen door latched. Marlene looked up. Her face was composed. She smiled, a little brilliantly. "Bella," she said, "I brought you some things. I went to that Italian market you like. I got the good olive oil. And some fresh bread." I stared at her through the mesh of the screen. "Did you get the letter?" I asked. She waved her hand, dismissing the question as if I had asked about the weather. "Oh, that silly thing. Yes, I got it. But look, I have cash." She put one of the grocery bags down and reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a white envelope. "I know you are worried about the money," she said, "so I scraped it together. I sold my grandmother's ring. You know the ruby one? I sold it. For you." She held the envelope up to the screen. I didn't unlock the door. How much is in there? I asked. $600, she said proudly. It is a start, right? $600, and I will get more next month. I promise. $600. The debt was $4,300. I looked at her. She was performing. She was playing the role of the sacrificial mother. I sold the ruby ring. She wanted me to fall to my knees and weep with gratitude. She wanted me to open the door and say, "Oh, Mom, you shouldn't have." But I knew the ruby ring was fake. We had found out years ago when I tried to get it appraised for insurance. She knew it was fake, too. She probably got $50 for the gold setting at a pawn shop. Leave the money on the mat. I said, "Bella, open the door," she said, her smile faltering. "I have groceries. I want to give you a hug." I stepped back. "No, open the door," she said, her voice rising, the sweetness evaporating. "I drove all the way over here. I sold my ring for you. Open the damn door and show some respect." "I am not opening the door," I said calmly. "You can leave the money and the groceries, or you can take them with you. But you are not coming in." Marlene stared at me. Her eyes narrowed. She dropped the envelope on the doormat. It landed with a soft slap. "You are being cruel," she spat. "I am being safe," I said. She laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Safe? From your own mother? From the person who stole my rent money?" I said, "From the person who signed my name to a predatory loan contract. From the person who called my landlord trying to sneak into my lease." She flinched. She didn't know I knew about the landlord call for sure until that moment. "I did that for you," she screamed. "How?" I asked. "I really want to know. How was stealing $4,000 for me?" "I was going to be evicted," she shrieked. The words echoed in the quiet townhouse complex. "My landlord gave me 3 days. 3 days. Bella, I didn't have anywhere else to go. I used that money to pay my back rent. If I hadn't taken it, I would be on the street. Is that what you want? You want your mother sleeping under a bridge?" I stood there, feeling the vibration of her yell in my bones. "So you saved yourself." I said. "I survived," she yelled. "And if I go homeless because you are suing me, that is on you. That is on your conscience. You will have to live with that." She picked up the grocery bags and threw them at the door. They hit the screen with a crash. A jar of something broke, probably the olive oil. Dark liquid started to seep across the concrete porch. I looked at the mess. I looked at the envelope of cash sitting in the puddle of oil. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked her in the eye through the mesh. "Why didn't you ask me?" I asked. My voice was quiet, barely a whisper. But she heard it. She stopped panting. She looked at me. "Why didn't you just call me and say, 'Bella, I am being evicted?'" I asked. "I would have helped you. I would have figured something out. Why did you have to steal it?" Marlene opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked away, toward the parking lot. For a moment, I thought she might answer. I thought she might say, "Because I was ashamed," or "because I was scared." But she didn't. She looked back at me, her eyes cold and hard as flint. "Because you would have made me beg," she said. The truth hung in the air between us, sharper than the broken glass on the porch. She didn't want my help. Help implies a request. Help implies gratitude. She wanted my resources, but she didn't want the vulnerability of asking for them. She wanted to take what she felt was hers without acknowledging that I had the power to give it. She stole it because stealing kept her in charge. I looked at her, and I finally saw her, not the mother I wanted, but the woman she was. "Get off my porch," I said. She glared at me one last time, then turned and marched to her car. She didn't look back. I waited until her car turned the corner and disappeared. I unlocked the screen door. I stepped over the broken glass and the pool of oil. I picked up the envelope. The corner was soaked in oil, turning the paper translucent. I took it inside. I counted it. $600. I put it in a Ziploc bag. I went to my desk. I picked up my phone and called Joel Kincaid. It was Saturday. But he picked up. "File the suit." I said. "Are you sure?" Joel asked. "Once we file, it is public record." I looked at the Ziploc bag on the table. I looked at the security camera feed showing the stain on my porch. She told me she did it because she didn't want to beg. I said, I paused. She is right. I said, she won't have to beg. She will have to testify. File it. Joel? I hung up. I went to the kitchen and got a bucket and a mop. I had to clean up the olive oil before it stained the concrete permanently. As I scrubbed the porch, the smell of the oil was overwhelming, rich and pungent. It smelled like the dinners she used to cook when I was a child. It smelled like the home I thought I had. I scrubbed until my arms ached. I scrubbed until the smell was gone. Then I went inside, locked the door, and set the alarm. The silence returned. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like the hush before a verdict. The pen in my hand felt like a surgical instrument. It was a standard blue ballpoint, the kind you find in a cup at any reception desk. But as I hovered over the signature line, it felt sharp enough to cut skin. Plaintiff, Bella Morgan. Defendant, Marlene Halstead. I was sitting in the conference room of Joel Kincaid's office. The air conditioning was humming a low, steady drone. Joel sat across from me, his hands folded on top of a yellow legal pad. He didn't push. He didn't check his watch. He just waited. I felt nauseous. A physical wave of sickness rolled through my stomach, tasting like bile and cold coffee. I was about to sue my mother. I was about to file a civil protection order against the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes, the woman who had held my hair back when I had the flu in 3rd grade. It felt like a violation of a natural law. Mothers protect daughters. Daughters honor mothers. We weren't supposed to be plaintiff and defendant. We were supposed to be family. But then I thought about the olive oil seeping into the concrete of my porch. I thought about the Northstone contract signed with a forged digital key. I thought about the $4.12 in my bank account. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed. Bella Morgan. I signed the petition for the anti-harassment order. I signed the complaint for civil restitution. I signed the affidavit detailing the financial interference. There, Joel said softly as I put the pen down. It is done. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I had just amputated a limb to stop gangrene from spreading. It was necessary, but it was still a loss. We will file these with the county clerk within the hour, Joel said, gathering the papers into a neat stack. You will have a hearing date for the temporary orders within 2 weeks. Until then, if she contacts you, do not engage, document everything. I nodded. I walked out of his office into the bright, flat sunlight of the strip mall parking lot. I got into my car and just sat there for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the sky to fall. It didn't fall. But the phone call started 3 hours later. Marlene didn't call. She knew better now. She knew I was tracking her, so she deployed the cavalry. The first call came from Aunt Denise. Denise was Marlene's younger sister, a woman who lived 2 towns over and communicated almost exclusively in Bible verses and passive-aggressive Facebook memes. I let it go to voicemail. Bella, this is your Aunt Denise. I just got off the phone with your mother. She is in a state, Bella, an absolute state. She says you are taking her to court? Over a misunderstanding? I am praying for your heart. Honey, you know the Bible says honor thy father and mother. It doesn't say sue them. Call me back. I deleted it. An hour later, my cousin Rhea called. Rhea and I used to be close when we were teenagers. Before she got sucked into the family vortex of drama and borrowing money. Hey B, look, I don't know what is going on, but Mom says Marlene is talking about suicide. You need to fix this. You can't just abandon her because she borrowed some cash. She said she offered to pay you back and you threw her off your porch? That is cold. B, that is really cold. I felt a spike of panic at the word suicide. It was Marlene's ultimate trump card. She had played it when my father left. She had played it when her car was repossessed in 2015. She played it whenever the walls closed in. I called Joel. She is telling people she is suicidal. I said, my voice shaking, if you believe she is in immediate danger, call 911, Joel said, his voice calm and professional. Request a wellness check. Do not go over there. Do not call her. If she is in crisis, she needs professionals. If she is using a threat of self-harm to manipulate a plaintiff in a pending lawsuit. That is a form of coercion. I called the non-emergency line. I requested a wellness check. I told the dispatcher my mother had made concerning statements to family members. A police cruiser went to the duplex. They called me back 20 minutes later. She is fine, ma'am, the officer said. She was watching TV. She said she was just venting to her sister, and that you are blowing things out of proportion. She seemed very calm. Of course she was. I sat in my living room, the silence of the townhouse pressing in on me. I blocked Aunt Denise. I blocked Rhea. I felt the circle closing. I was cutting them off, one by one. I was becoming an island. The day of the hearing was gray and rainy, the kind of Washington weather that makes everything look like it is underwater. I wore my charcoal interview suit. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I wanted to look like a manager. I wanted to look like a taxpayer. I wanted to look like anything other than a scared daughter. I met Joel outside the courtroom. He looked reassuringly boring in his gray suit. "She is here," he said. I looked down the hallway. Marlene was sitting on a wooden bench. She had dressed for the occasion. She was wearing a navy blue cardigan buttoned to the neck, a modest skirt, and her glasses on a chain around her neck. She held a thick white binder in her lap. She looked like a schoolteacher. She looked responsible. She looked like a sweet, older woman who had been dragged into a bureaucratic nightmare by an ungrateful child. She saw me. She didn't glare. She gave me a sad, longing look, like she wanted to run over and hug me but was being held back by an invisible force. It was a performance, and it was terrifyingly good. I felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe I was the villain. Look at her. She was just an old woman with a binder. "Focus," Joel whispered. "Facts, not feelings." We walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected. Just a room with fluorescent lights, a few rows of benches, and a raised dais for the judge. The judge was a woman with short gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. Judge Holloway. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Marlene sat at the respondent's table alone. She didn't have a lawyer. She had her binder. Judge Holloway reviewed the file for a long moment. The silence was heavy. "Ms. Morgan," the judge said, looking at me, "you are petitioning for a civil protection order regarding financial interference and requesting restitution for unauthorized transfers." "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling under the table. "State your case." I stood up. I didn't look at Marlene. I looked at the judge. On February 2nd, the respondent, Marlene Halstead, used a previously authorized digital token to transfer $3,945 from my checking account without my knowledge or consent. I said, "This caused me to default on my rent payment and forced me to secure a high-interest loan to avoid eviction." I paused. Furthermore, upon review of my bank records, I discovered a pattern of unauthorized transfers totaling over $5,000 over the last 18 months. Additionally, on February 2nd, the respondent used my personal identifying information to co-sign a financial agreement with an entity known as Northstone Family Solutions. Forging my electronic signature, I submitted the exhibits: the bank audit, the Northstone inquiry, the affidavit from the bank. Judge Holloway flipped through the pages. She looked at the red spikes on the graph I had made. "Ms. Halstead?" the judge said, turning to Marlene. Marlene stood up. She clutched her binder to her chest. "Your Honor," she began, her voice quavering just the right amount. I am shocked that it has come to this. I am a mother. I love my daughter." She opened the binder. It was full of papers, but from where I stood, they looked like random receipts and old photos. "I didn't steal anything," Marlene said. "We had an arrangement, a family arrangement. I helped Bella when she was struggling in her 20s. I let her live with me rent-free. We shared resources. That account link? She set it up. She gave me the access. I thought we were helping each other. I needed a bridge loan for an emergency, and I intended to pay it back." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. I didn't know she would take me to court. Marlene said, "I offered to pay her back. I brought her cash last week, and she wouldn't even open the door. She threw my groceries on the ground." The judge looked at Marlene. You admit to taking the $3,945? I admit to borrowing it, Marlene corrected. As a mother borrowing from a daughter she raised and sacrificed for. And the Northstone contract? The judge asked. Did you sign Ms. Morgan's name? Marlene hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. I signed it as a household partner, she said. The representative told me it was standard. I thought Bella would want to help me consolidate my debts, so I wouldn't be a burden on her. I was trying to protect her inheritance. Your Honor, inheritance? Marlene had negative net worth. Judge Holloway took off her glasses. Ms. Halstead, unauthorized access to a bank account, even by a family member, is theft. Signing another adult's name to a financial contract without express written power of attorney is forgery. These are not family arrangements. These are crimes. Marlene's face changed. The sad mother mask slipped, replaced by a look of genuine confusion. She didn't understand. She truly believed that her status as mother superseded the penal code. But I gave birth to her, Marlene said. The judge ignored her and turned to me. I am granting the temporary protection order, the judge said. Ms. Halstead, you are ordered to have no contact with the petitioner except through legal counsel. You are prohibited from accessing, attempting to access, or inquiring about any of Ms. Morgan's financial accounts. You are to remove her name from any and all shared accounts immediately. The judge made a note on the file. Regarding the Northstone matter, I am issuing a subpoena for their full records. We will review the restitution claim in 30 days once we have the full scope of the financial liability. Marlene stood there, her mouth slightly open, the binder hung loose in her hand. But she can't just cut me off, Marlene stammered. I have bills. That is not the court's concern. Ms. Halstead, the judge said, you are dismissed. I walked out of the courtroom. My legs felt like jelly. I had won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving a car crash. I stopped at the water fountain in the hallway to take a pill for the headache that was splitting my skull. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Marlene was there. Joel was a few paces back, talking to the clerk. I was alone with her for 5 seconds. She didn't look sad anymore. She looked focused. Her eyes were dry and hard. She stepped close to me. She didn't yell. She leaned in, like she was going to share a secret recipe. You don't know who you are poking at, she whispered. I stared at her. What? Northstone, she hissed. You think you are so smart with your spreadsheets. But you don't know who they are. You shouldn't have subpoenaed them. Bella, you really shouldn't have done that. She pulled back, and instantly, the tears returned. She looked over my shoulder at a passing bailiff and dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I just love her so much. She sobbed loudly. For the benefit of the hallway, she walked away, clutching her binder, leaving me standing by the water fountain with a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. That evening, I sat in my townhouse with Nia. Nia had come over with takeout and a bottle of wine, but we hadn't opened the wine. We were looking at my laptop. You don't know who you are poking at. I had typed Northstone Family Solutions into every search engine I could find. At first glance, they looked legitimate, a generic website, a list of services, but as I dug deeper, looking at consumer complaint boards, Reddit threads, and Better Business Bureau filings, a darker picture emerged. They weren't a bank. They weren't even a licensed debt consolidator in Washington state. They were a mediation firm, basically, Nia said, scrolling through a forum post. They are a predatory settlement mill. They convince people who are drowning in debt to stop paying their bills and send the money to Northstone instead. Northstone takes a 40% fee, and then maybe they negotiate with the creditors. Usually, they just let the client get sued. I looked at the complaints. They took my house. They garnered my wages. They won't stop calling, but it was the names that caught my eye. The leadership team wasn't listed on the site, but in a dissolved corporate filing from Nevada, I found via a deep web search. The registered agent was a holding company connected to a man named Gordon Price. Gordon Price, the name triggered a memory, a deeply buried Childhood memory. I closed my eyes. I was 10 years old. We were at a revival tent meeting. Marlene was holding my hand too tight. A man on stage was shouting about seed money, about planting a financial seed to harvest a miracle. Gordon Price? He was the pastor, or the financial advisor, or both. Marlene wasn't just a customer of Northstone. She was a follower. "This isn't just a scam," I whispered. "It is her scam. She knows these people." "That explains why she signed you up," Nia said. "She wasn't just trying to get a loan. She was trying to bring you into the fold. She was feeding you to them." I felt sick. Marlene had recruited me. Nia closed the laptop. "Okay, enough detective work. We need a safety plan. If this Gordon guy is as shady as he looks, and Marlene is desperate, things could get weird." We made a list. It felt ridiculous, like I was a spy in a bad movie. But Nia insisted. "Call screening." My phone was already set to silence unknown numbers. Nia set up a Google Voice number for me to give out to vendors so I could change my primary number if needed. Cameras. I had the front door camera. We ordered 2 more for the back patio and the garage. Carson. I had to tell him. I couldn't be vague anymore. I drafted an email to Carson Vale explicitly stating that Marlene Halstead was barred by court order from the premises and that any attempt by her to access the property should be reported to the police. Documentation. I bought a physical logbook. Every call, every text, every sighting. I feel like I'm parenting myself. I said, looking at the list, "I am 33 years old, and I am making a chore chart for how to not get stalked by my mother." "You are parenting yourself," Nia said, "because she abdicated the role. You are the adult in the room, Bella. And being the adult means locking the doors." I looked at the dark window. I felt weirdly capable. The fear was still there, but it was managed. It was a logistical problem, and I was good at logistics. 3 days later, the certified letter arrived. It wasn't from Northstone. It was from Atlas Recovery Services. I signed for it. My hand shaking slightly. I opened it in the kitchen. Notice of accelerated balance. Northstone Family Solutions Agreement. $88,392. Guarantor, Bella Morgan. Dear Miss Morgan, this letter serves as notification that the primary applicant, Marlene Halstead, has defaulted on the initial deposit requirements for the restructuring agreement. Per the terms of the contract you co-signed, the full balance of the service fee is now accelerated and due immediately. Total due, $7,500. Failure to remit payment within 10 days will result in legal action, credit reporting, and potential wage garnishment. $7,500. The $350 monthly payment had just exploded into a lump sum demand because Marlene hadn't paid her share. I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor like a dead bird. They were moving fast. Too fast. It had been less than 2 weeks. Legitimate creditors don't accelerate a balance after one missed payment. This was aggressive. This was a shakedown. You don't know who you are poking at. Marlene's whisper came back to me. She knew this would happen. She knew that if she stopped paying, or if I fought back, the machine would turn on me. I picked up the letter and drove to Joel's office. I didn't call. I just drove. Joel met me in the lobby. He saw the letter in my hand. "Come back," he said. He read the letter. His face grew tight. "This is retaliation," he said. "They know we subpoenaed them. They are trying to scare you into paying before the court can invalidate the contract. Can they garnish me?" I asked. "Can they take my paycheck?" "Not without a judgment," Joel said. "And to get a judgment, they have to sue you. And if they sue you, they have to prove the debt is valid. Which it isn't. It is forged." He pulled a file from his drawer. "I am filing a motion to invalidate the contract immediately," Joel said. "We are going to attach the police report for identity theft. Yes, Bella. We have to file a police report now. We can't just do civil court anymore. This is a $7,000 fraud. We need a criminal complaint number to freeze this collection activity." I nodded. The reluctance I had felt at the beginning, the nausea, the guilt, was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard survival instinct. "Do it," I said. "File the report." Joel started typing. "Bella," he said, not looking up, "you need to understand something. When we file this criminal complaint, the district attorney might pick it up. Marlene could face charges, real charges." I looked at the letter from Atlas Recovery. I thought about the seed money revivals. I thought about Marlene's fake ruby ring. I thought about the way she looked at me in the hallway, not with love, but with the calculation of a predator assessing prey. She invited this machine into my life. I said, she signed my name to it. I stood up and walked to the window of Joel's office. "I am not the one charging her." "Joel," I said, "I am just stopping her from charging me." Joel nodded. He hit print. The printer whirred. Chug, chug, pause. The sound of the machine was the only thing in the room. I wasn't fighting for my rent money anymore. That $3,950 seemed quaint now, a small price to pay for the lesson I was learning. I was fighting to untangle myself from a web that had been spun around me before I was even born. Marlene wasn't just a bad mother. She was a cog in something bigger, and she had tried to pull me into the gears. I turned back to Joel. "Let's burn the contract," I said. And as I said it, I realized that burning the contract meant burning the relationship. There would be no going back after this. No Thanksgiving dinners. No awkward birthday calls. If I won, I would be debt-free. And I would be an orphan. I looked at the pen on the table. I was ready to sign. The red notification light on my phone pulsed like a slow, rhythmic warning. It was sitting on my nightstand, glowing in the darkness of the townhouse. It was 11 o'clock at night. The world should have been asleep, but the world, or at least the part of it that contained my mother, was awake and scheming. I picked up the phone, a voicemail from a restricted number. My stomach tightened. The temporary protection order was clear. No contact, no calls, no third-party messages, but Marlene had never respected a boundary in her life, and she wasn't about to start respecting one signed by Judge Holloway. I pressed play, my thumb hovering over the save button. Bella. The voice was unmistakable, but the tone was wrong. It wasn't the weeping victim I had seen in the hallway. It wasn't the screaming woman on my porch. It was cold, transactional, businesslike. "Look, I know the lawyers are doing their thing." Marlene said, "But this is getting out of hand. You are going to ruin everything if you keep pushing on the Northstone stuff. Just drop the case, drop the lawsuit, and I will sign whatever paper you want. I will sign the repayment thing. I will sign the no contact thing. Just stop digging. Bella, you are going to hurt people you don't mean to hurt." The message ended. There was no "I love you." There was no "I miss you." Just a bargain. Stop digging, and I will give you what you want. I saved the recording. Then I emailed it to Joel Kincaid with a timestamp. I lay back on my pillow, staring at the ceiling fan blades cutting through the shadows. She wasn't asking me to drop the case to save our relationship. She was asking me to drop it because I had touched a nerve. I had found something she was desperate to hide. You are going to hurt people you don't mean to hurt. Who? Her? Or someone else? The days leading up to the next court hearing were a blur of gray fatigue. I went to work. I sat in my ergonomic chair. I looked at logistics spreadsheets. But the numbers swam before my eyes. I was a manager who prided herself on precision, on catching the smallest error in a shipping manifest. But now I was the one making mistakes. On Tuesday, I sent an email to a client with the wrong attachment, a draft invoice instead of the final. The client replied with a confused question marks. I stared at the screen and felt a flash of disproportionate rage. I wanted to throw the monitor through the window. I typed a reply that was too sharp. It was an error, obviously. I am sending the correct one now. I hit send and immediately regretted the tone. It was unprofessional. It was brittle. At noon, I walked out to my car to get my lunchbox. But when I got there, I realized I had left it on the kitchen counter at home. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. It was just a sandwich. It was just turkey and Swiss on rye. But the realization that I couldn't even manage the basic task of feeding myself broke something inside me. I started to cry. It wasn't a cinematic, weeping cry. It was a silent, leaking exhaustion. The tears just rolled down my face, hot and humiliating. I was 33 years old. I was suing my mother. I was hiding from my family. I was spending my evenings documenting harassment logs instead of dating or reading or living. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The skin felt raw. I am falling apart. I whispered to the dashboard, but I couldn't fall apart. Falling apart was what Marlene did. Falling apart was her strategy. I had to be the rock. I had to be the wall. I went back inside, drank a glass of cold water, and apologized to the client. I put the mask back on, but I could feel the cracks on the inside, widening with every hour. 2 days later, Joel called. We got the documents from Northstone. He said, or at least, we got what they haven't shredded yet. You need to come in. I drove to his office immediately after work. The strip mall looked different in the rain, glum and washed out. Joel was waiting for me in the conference room. A stack of papers sat on the table, thicker than the last one. Northstone complied with the subpoena, Joel said, tapping the stack, barely. They redacted a lot of client lists, claiming privacy, but they couldn't redact the internal notes on the Halstead file because you are a named party. He slid a page toward me. Look at the intake officer, he said. I looked at the top of the form. Account Executive. Gordon Price. Title. Senior Wealth Advisor. Gordon Price. The name hit me like a physical blow. Unlocking a door in my memory I had nailed shut 20 years ago. I closed my eyes. I was 12 years old. We were in a rented community hall, the air thick with the smell of cheap perfume and floor wax. Marlene was sitting next to me, her eyes shining with a fervor that frightened me. On the stage, a man in a tan suit was pacing back and forth, holding a microphone. He was sweating. He was shouting about the laws of harvest. You cannot reap if you do not sow, he bellowed. You have to plant the seed. You have to release the money to God so he can multiply it. That was Gordon Price. He wasn't a pastor. He was a financial minister. He traveled through the church circuit, selling seminars on biblical wealth building. Marlene had been obsessed with him. She bought his tapes. She bought his workbooks. She gave him seed offerings when we couldn't afford groceries. I opened my eyes. I know him, I said, my voice hollow. He is a con man from the church circuit. Marlene used to follow him in the 90s. Joel nodded grimly. Well, he has upgraded. He isn't just doing tent revivals anymore. He is running a debt settlement mill. And look at the dates. Bella. I looked at the transaction log Joel pointed to. It wasn't just the recent loan application. The record showed a history of consulting fees paid by Marlene Halstead to various entities connected to Price going back 5 years. $200 here, $500 there. She has been paying him for years, I whispered. Joel leaned forward. This is the pattern. Marlene is drowning in debt, likely caused by giving money to Price's earlier schemes. So she goes to Price to solve the debt. He signs her up for this Northstone program, which charges her fees she can't afford, to settle debts she shouldn't have. And when she runs dry, she brings him fresh meat. I finished. Me. She didn't just steal the rent money to pay a landlord. I realized. She stole it to feed the machine. She needed to keep her status with Gordon. She needed to show him she was still sewing, and when the cash ran out, she offered him my credit score. She wasn't just a bad mother. She was a recruit. She was a victim who had become a recruiter. This changes things, Joel said. We aren't just suing Marlene for theft. We are uncovering a racketeering operation. Marlene is terrified because if we depose Gordon Price, we expose the whole game, subpoena him. I said. Joel looked at me. Bella, if we drag Price into this, Marlene is going to lose her mind. She worships this man. To her. He is the path to salvation. You are attacking her God. I looked at the name on the paper. Gordon Price. He took our grocery money when I was 12. I said, he took my rent money when I was 33. I looked up at Joel. "Subpoena him. I want to see him in court." The reaction was immediate. Joel filed the subpoena for Gordon Price's deposition and requested all communications between Price and Marlene. Within 24 hours, the silence from the family broke. But it wasn't the angry, moralizing noise from before. It was the frantic, hushed panic of people who realize the house is on fire. Aunt Denise didn't leave a voicemail this time. She sent a text. "Bella, please, you don't know what you are doing. Gordon is a good man. He has helped so many of us. You are going to cause so much trouble. Just stop. He has helped so many of us." I read the text twice. Gordon hadn't just infected Marlene. He had infected the whole family tree. Aunt Denise, Cousin Rhea, they were all in it. They had all given him money. They were all waiting for their harvest. If I exposed Gordon, I wouldn't just be proving Marlene was a thief. I would be proving that they were all fools. I would be shattering the collective delusion that kept them going. I didn't reply. I screenshotted the text and sent it to the logbook. The next morning, Carson Vale called me at work. "Bella, do you have a minute?" His voice was serious. "Yes." "Carson, is everything okay? I need you to change your login credentials for the tenant portal," he said. "Immediately." "Why?" "We had 3 failed login attempts this morning," he said. "Someone was trying to access your payment history and lease documents. They used the wrong password. But they knew your username. My username was my email address. Marlene knew my email address." "Did you trace the IP?" I asked. "We did," Carson said. "It came from a public library in downtown Larkhill. Marlene didn't have internet at home anymore. Joel suspected she had cut it to save money or to hide her tracks. So she was going to the library. She was sitting at a public terminal, surrounded by strangers, trying to break into my digital home. She was looking for something. Maybe she wanted to see if I was actually paying rent. Maybe she wanted to find a clause to use against me. Or maybe she just wanted to feel close to me in the sickest way possible, by possessing my data. "I will change it," I said. "Thank you." "Carson." I hung up. I felt violated. It was worse than her standing on my porch. This was invisible. It was a ghost rattling the doorknobs of my life. I changed the password to a string of 50 random characters. I felt like I was fortifying a castle against a siege. When I got home that evening, there was a letter in my mailbox. It looked innocent enough. A standard business envelope from Pacific Power and Light. I frowned. I didn't use Pacific Power. My townhouse was in a different district that used a co-op. Marlene used Pacific Power. I opened the envelope. Inside was a check. A refund check for $42.15. Paid to the order of Bella Morgan. Service address, 442 Maple Street. Marlene's address. I stared at the check. The world tilted on its axis. The utility account at Marlene's duplex wasn't in her name. It was in mine. She must have opened it years ago. Or maybe recently, using my social security number. She had been paying the bills until she overpaid this one, triggering a refund, and because the account was in my name, the computer automatically issued the check to me. But it was mailed to her house, which meant she usually intercepted the mail. This one must have been forwarded by the post office because I had put in a general forwarding order when I moved. And the system caught my name. It was a slip-up, a bureaucratic glitch, but it revealed the iceberg beneath the surface. I wasn't just her daughter. I was her utility mule. I was her credit privacy shield. How many other accounts were out there? Was the water bill in my name? The trash collection? The internet? I walked into the kitchen and added the check to the evidence pile. It was growing into a mountain. Joel set up a settlement conference. It wasn't a court hearing. It was a meeting between counsel, an attempt to resolve the issue before the judge had to make a final ruling. Marlene wouldn't be there, only her newly acquired public defender, a weary-looking man named Mr. Henderson, no relation to my boss. I sat in Joel's office while he put the call on speaker. "Mr. Henderson," Joel said, "we are prepared to make a global settlement offer to resolve all pending civil matters. Let's hear it." Henderson's voice crackled over the polycom. "First," Joel said, "Marlene Halstead will repay the $3,950, plus the documented loan fees and interest. totaling $4,300. We are willing to accept a payment plan of $100 a month, garnished directly from her disability benefits to ensure compliance. There was a pause. Go on. Second, Joel continued, Marlene will sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the unauthorized access of the bank account and the forgery of the Northstone contract. This affidavit will be held in escrow and only filed if she violates the agreement. Third, Joel said, looking at me, a permanent civil protection order for a period of 5 years, no contact, no third-party contact, no financial access, and she must close any and all accounts currently open in Bella Morgan's name, including the Pacific Power account we discovered yesterday. I held my breath. It was generous. It was incredibly generous. I was letting her off the hook for the criminal charges if she just agreed to stop. The line was silent for a long time. I heard papers shuffling. Ms. Halstead has authorized me to respond, Henderson said, and his voice sounded uncomfortable. He sounded like a man who was relaying a message he knew was irrational. She rejects the offer. She rejects it? Joel asked. On what grounds? It keeps her out of jail. Counselor. She says. Henderson cleared his throat. She says she will not sign an admission of guilt because she is not guilty. She says she is a mother who was providing for her household. And she says the no-contact order is an attempt by her daughter to, and I quote, erase her from existence. I closed my eyes. Erase her. She saw boundaries as erasure. She saw independence as death. There is one more thing, Henderson said. Ms. Halstead wanted me to convey a message. She said to remind Bella about the St. Jude matter. The room went absolute zero. Joel looked at me. His eyebrows pulled together. What is the St. Jude matter? I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, resting on the mahogany table, went numb. Henderson continued. She said she has the papers from 2016. The hospital admission. The debt collections that followed. She said if this goes to open court, and her character is attacked, she feels it is only fair that the full financial history of both parties be examined, including the time she bailed Bella out. It was a threat, a blackmail threat delivered through a lawyer. She suggests you drop the Northstone subpoena and the restitution claim. Henderson said, in exchange, she will agree to a mutual stay-away order. No money changes hands. Everyone walks away. I couldn't speak. We will take it under advisement, Joel said coldly. He ended the call. He turned to me. Bella, Joel said gently, what is the St. Jude matter? I stared at the black speakerphone. I felt like I was 23 again. I was 23. I had just graduated college. I was working 2 jobs, trying to save money to move out. I pushed myself too hard. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I had a breakdown. It wasn't a nervous exhaustion. It was a full psychotic break induced by stress and sleep deprivation. I was hospitalized at St. Jude's Behavioral Health Unit for 72 hours. It was the most shameful moment of my life. I was strapped to a gurney. I was medicated. And Marlene had been there. She had signed the admission papers because I was incapacitated. She had bailed me out by paying the deductible, $500, which she held over my head for years. But the shame wasn't the money. The shame was the weakness. Marlene had used that hospitalization as proof that I was fragile, proof that I couldn't handle the real world, proof that I needed her to manage me. You are just like your father, weak, crazy. She had kept the papers, the admission forms, the diagnosis, and she was threatening to release them into the public record of the lawsuit. She was threatening to paint me as mentally unstable to discredit my testimony. She was going to weaponize my lowest moment to protect her theft. Bella? Joel asked again. I looked at him. I could lie. I could say it was nothing. I could tell him to drop the case to save my secret. If I dropped the case, she won. If I dropped the case, she would know that she still owned me. She would know that my shame was a leash she could yank whenever she wanted money. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt thin. I was hospitalized. I said, my voice was quiet but steady. In 2016, I had a mental health crisis. I was at St. Jude's for 3 days. I looked Joel in the eye. She paid the deductible, $500. She has the medical records. She is threatening to use them to prove I am unstable. Joel didn't flinch. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with respect. "Okay," he said. "That is it?" I asked. "That is it," Joel said. "Bella, half the country has medical debt. A third of the country has sought mental health treatment. This isn't the leverage she thinks it is. In a court of law, your medical history from 7 years ago has zero relevance to whether or not she forged a signature last month. But she will say it," I whispered. "She will say it in open court. Everyone will know. Let her say it," Joel said fiercely. "Let her try. Judge Holloway will cut her off so fast her head will spin. It is irrelevant. It is prejudicial. And frankly, it makes her look like a monster." He leaned forward. "The question isn't whether she can hurt you with it," Joel said. "The question is whether you are willing to let her try." I thought about the papers Marlene was hoarding. She treated my trauma like a currency. She saved it up, investing in my pain so she could cash it out later. I wasn't afraid of the court knowing. I was afraid of her knowing she could hurt me. But if I told Joel, if I put it on the table, she couldn't hurt me. You can't blackmail someone with a secret they have already told. I squared my shoulders. "I want to disclose it." I said, "What?" Joel asked. "I want to file a motion in limine," I said, using a term I had learned from my late-night Googling, to exclude the medical records as irrelevant. "I want to put it in the filing. Plaintiff acknowledges a brief hospitalization in 2016. I want to own it." I smiled, and it felt like the first real smile in weeks. "If I put it in the paperwork," I said. "She can't reveal it, because I already did." Joel smiled back. He picked up his pen. "That is a hell of a move. Bella, draft it," I said. "Put it all in. The hospitalization, the deductible, the fact that she paid it. Put it all in the narrative." I looked at the window, where the rain was still falling. "She thinks my shame is a weapon," I said. "I am going to turn it into a shield." We worked for another hour. We drafted the response. We rejected the settlement. We reaffirmed the subpoena for Gordon Price, and we added a section addressing the St. Jude matter, framing it as irrelevant history that the defendant was attempting to use for harassment purposes. When I walked out of Joel's office that night, I felt lighter. The secret was gone. The leverage was gone. Marlene had tried to play her ace. She had tried to remind me that I was the broken daughter, the crazy daughter, the one who needed saving, but she forgot one thing. I had healed, and she was the one who was sick. I got into my car and drove home. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I stopped at a grocery store and bought a frozen lasagna, a better one than she could make. I went home, heated it up, and ate it while watching the security camera feed. The porch was empty. The driveway was empty. I was alone. And for the first time, I realized that alone wasn't a punishment. It was a victory. Part 5 ended with me eating lasagna in the quiet, but the storm wasn't over. Gordon Price was coming. The court date was coming. And Marlene, stripped of her blackmail material, was about to become more dangerous than ever. A cornered animal doesn't negotiate. It attacks. But I was ready. I had my receipts. I had my truth. And I had the one thing Marlene never accounted for. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The hallway outside courtroom 3B smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a specific scent, one I associated with the DMV, or hospital waiting rooms, places where you're forced to realize how little control you actually have over your own life. I sat on a wooden bench that was polished to a slippery shine. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on top of a red accordion folder. Inside that folder was my life, reduced to paper, bank statements, IP address logs, the affidavit regarding the Northstone forgery, the logbook of unwanted calls. I was 33 years old. I was a logistics manager. I paid my taxes. I flossed. Yet, sitting there, I felt like I was 6 years old again, waiting in the principal's office because Marlene had forgotten to pick me up. The old programming was trying to override my operating system, the daughter protocol. It whispered that I was being mean. It whispered that I was embarrassing the family. It whispered that a good daughter absorbs the damage so the mother doesn't have to break. I closed my eyes and breathed in for a count of 4. I am not a daughter today. I told myself, I am a plaintiff. Beside me. Joel Kincaid was checking his email on his phone. He looked calm. To him. This was Tuesday. To me. It was the end of the world as I knew it. She is inside, Joel said, not looking up. She brought the binder again. I nodded. Of course she did. Marlene loved props. The heavy oak doors opened. A bailiff with a tired face stuck his head out. Morgan versus Halstead. He called out. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as if gravity had increased just for me. I smoothed the skirt of my charcoal suit. I picked up the red folder. Ready? Joel asked. No, I said honestly. Good, Joel said. Being scared keeps you sharp. Let's go. We walked into the courtroom. It was the same room as the preliminary hearing, but it felt smaller today. The air was thicker. Marlene was already at the respondent's table. Her public defender, Mr. Henderson, was stacking papers. Marlene was wearing a pastel cardigan, soft pink. It was a color designed to evoke sympathy. She didn't look at me. She was staring at the judge's empty chair with a look of pious suffering, like a martyr waiting for the lions. We took our seats. All rise. The bailiff droned. Judge Holloway entered. She moved with a swift, efficient energy. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and opened the file. We are here for the final hearing on the matter of the permanent protection order and the claim for civil restitution, Judge Holloway said. I have reviewed the submitted briefs, including the plaintiff's motion in Lemine regarding prior medical history, which has been granted. We will stick to the financial facts today. I saw Marlene stiffen. She had heard that. Her ace in the hole, the St. Jude hospitalization, had just been discarded before the game even started. She turned her head slightly and shot a look at me. It wasn't sad. It was venomous. Ms. Morgan, the judge said, please take the stand. I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. The microphone was right in front of my face. I could hear my own breathing amplified in the quiet room. Joel stood up. Ms. Morgan, can you please state for the court the nature of your relationship with the respondent? She is my mother. I said, and can you describe the event on February 2nd? I took a breath. I opened the red folder in my mind. On February 2nd, I checked my bank account to verify my rent payment for my new townhouse. I discovered that $3,945 had been transferred out of my account without my permission. The transfer was sent to an account held by Marlene Halstead. Did you authorize this transfer? Joel asked. No. I said, did you have a loan agreement with your mother? No, I went on. I laid it out, brick by brick. I spoke about the rent-only sub-account. I spoke about the conversation in her living room where she admitted to borrowing it for an emergency. I spoke about the discovery of the smaller transfers, the $20 here, the $50 there, that showed she had been using my account as a slush fund for over a year. I kept my voice flat. I didn't cry. I channeled the part of me that managed shipping lanes. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a manifest of errors. Then we got to the Northstone contract. I submitted Exhibit C, I said, pointing to the screen where Joel projected the document. This is a debt consolidation agreement with Northstone Family Solutions. It lists me as a guarantor. The signature is dated February 2nd at 10:45 in the morning. Were you present at that time? No. I said, I was at work. My timesheet is submitted as Exhibit D. Did you sign this document? No. Who signed it? The IP address trace provided by Northstone's compliance department confirms the signature originated from the respondent's home internet connection. I looked at Marlene. She was scribbling furiously on a notepad. She wouldn't meet my eyes. And finally, Joel said, the landlord. I told the court about the call to Carson Vale. I told them about her attempt to get a key. I told them about the login attempt at the public library. This was not a one-time lapse in judgment. I said, looking directly at Judge Holloway, this is a pattern of surveillance and financial extraction. My mother does not view my assets as separate from her own. She views my autonomy as a threat. I am asking the court to make the separation legal. Because she refuses to respect it personally. I finished. Mr. Henderson stood up to cross-examine me. He looked tired. He knew he had a bad hand. Ms. Morgan, he said, you say you didn't authorize the transfer, but isn't it true that you gave your mother access to your account 4 years ago? I did. I said, when I was living with her, to pay for groceries. And you never formally revoked that access with the bank until after this incident? I assumed it was no longer active. I said, so, legally speaking, the door was left open? I leaned into the microphone. Leaving your front door unlocked does not give your neighbor the right to walk in and take your television. Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson paused. He shuffled his papers. Miss Morgan, isn't it true that your mother has supported you financially in the past? That she bailed you out during difficult times? I knew where he was going. He was trying to skirt the edge of the St. Jude ruling. She paid a $500 deductible 7 years ago. I said clearly, which I repaid. That does not entitle her to $4,000 of my rent money today. Mr. Henderson sat down. He had nothing. Marlene took the stand. She walked slowly, holding the railing like she was frail. She adjusted the microphone. She looked at the judge with wide, watery eyes. Mrs. Halstead. Henderson asked, did you take the money? Marlene sighed, a long, tragic exhale. I borrowed it, she said softly. I was in a crisis. I was facing eviction. I didn't want to worry Bella. She has been so fragile lately. I thought I could fix it before she noticed. Fragile. There it was. The code word. And the Northstone contract? Henderson asked. She agreed to that, Marlene said, her voice rising with sudden animation. We talked about it. At Christmas. I told her I needed to get my finances in order, and she said, Mom, I will do whatever it takes to help you. She said we were a team. I stared at her. We hadn't spoken at Christmas. I had worked the holiday shift. So you interpreted that as permission to sign her name? Henderson asked, trying to lead her to a safer legal ground. I interpreted it as love, Marlene cried. She is my daughter. We don't have these cold legal walls between us, or we didn't, until she started listening to outsiders. She shot a look at Joel. Joel stood up for cross-examination. He didn't smile. He was a shark smelling blood in the water. Mrs. Halstead. Joel said, you say you borrowed the money for an eviction crisis. Yes. Who was your landlord at the time? Marlene blinked. Mr. Kowalski. We have a sworn affidavit from Mr. Kowalski, Joel said, holding up a paper. He states your rent was paid in full on the 1st of the month. He states there was no eviction notice. Marlene froze. Her mouth opened and closed. Well, it wasn't the rent, she stammered. It was the utilities. The heat was going to be turned off. The transfer was for nearly $4,000. Joel said, was your heating bill $4,000? I have other debts, Marlene snapped. The mask slipping. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. And who is Paul? Joel asked. Is Paul a man named Gordon Price? Marlene flinched as if he had slapped her. I don't know what you are talking about, she whispered. We have records, Joel said, his voice hard. Bank records showing transfers from your account to Northstone Family Solutions and Personal Wealth Ministries dating back 5 years. You took Bella's money to pay Gordon Price, didn't you? He is a financial advisor, Marlene shouted. She gripped the railing. He is a man of God. He was helping me build a legacy. I did it for her. I wanted to leave her something other than debt. By stealing her rent money? Joel asked. You don't understand. Marlene yelled. She was standing up now, shaking. You don't understand the harvest. You have to plant the seed. I was planting a seed. The courtroom was silent. The echo of her shout hung in the air. You have to plant the seed. It was the logic of a cult. It was the logic of an addict. She had stolen my reality to feed her fantasy. Judge Holloway looked at Marlene with an expression that was part pity, part judgment. Sit down. Mrs. Halstead, the judge said quietly. Gordon Price did not appear in person. He sent a lawyer, a slick man in a suit that cost more than my car. He submitted a sworn affidavit. I listened as the judge read it into the record. Mr. Price denies any personal knowledge of the source of funds provided by Mrs. Halstead. He asserts that Northstone Family Solutions acts merely as a document preparation service and that all clients sign indemnification clauses verifying they have the legal right to the funds they present. It was legalese for I take the money. I don't ask where it comes from. The judge looked at the Northstone documents. She looked at the forged signature. This court finds the affidavit of Mr. Price to be convenient, Judge Holloway said dryly. However, Mr. Price is not on trial today. Mrs. Halstead is. I felt a surge of frustration. Gordon was going to get away with it. He was going to slide back into the shadows with his pockets full of my mother's money. And my money. While Marlene took the fall. But then I saw the judge make a note on a separate pad. She circled something and read. The ruling came 20 minutes later. Judge Holloway sat straight in her chair. She looked at me. Then she looked at Marlene. I am issuing a permanent civil protection order. The judge said, Mrs. Halstead, you are prohibited from contacting the plaintiff directly or indirectly for a period of 5 years. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her residence or place of employment. You are prohibited from accessing, attempting to access, or inquiring about any financial account held by the plaintiff. Marlene made a small, wounded sound. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am voiding the Northstone contract as it pertains to Ms. Morgan on the grounds of fraud and forgery. A copy of this order will be sent to their legal department. If they attempt to collect from Ms. Morgan, they will be held in contempt of this court. I exhaled. The weight on my chest lightened. I was free of the debt. Regarding restitution, the judge said, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Judgment is entered against Marlene Halstead in the amount of $4,300. I had won. I had the order. I had the judgment. Then Mr. Henderson stood up. Your Honor, he said. He looked uncomfortable. He picked up a document from his briefcase. It was a single sheet of paper. At this time, we need to enter a notice of filing into the record. What notice? The judge asked. As of 9 this morning, Mr. Henderson said, avoiding my eyes, Mrs. Halstead has filed a voluntary petition for relief under Chapter 7 of the United States Bankruptcy Code. The room stopped. I looked at Joel. His face had gone hard. Bankruptcy. Joel whispered, the automatic stay is in effect. Henderson said, all collection actions, including this judgment for restitution, must be halted immediately, pending the trustee's review. I stared at Marlene. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at her hands. She knew. She had known the whole time. She didn't steal the $3,950 to save herself from eviction. She stole it because she knew she was about to pull the plug on her entire financial life. She was cashing out. She took my money, hid it or spent it on Gordon, and then filed for bankruptcy to wash away the sin. She assumed I wouldn't fight. She assumed I would just be another creditor on a list of 20, getting pennies on the dollar 5 years from now. Ms. Morgan, the judge said. Her voice was gentle. Because of the federal bankruptcy filing, this court cannot enforce the collection of the money at this time. The debt is now part of the federal case. You will have to file a claim with the bankruptcy trustee. I understand. I said. My voice didn't shake. I wasn't crushed by the loss of the money. The money was gone the minute she took it. I was crushed by the calculation. It wasn't desperation. It was strategy. She had planned this. She had looked at me, smiled, told me she was proud of me, and then methodically stripped my account, knowing she had a legal shield ready to deploy. The hearing was adjourned. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was empty now. I walked toward the elevators. I just wanted to get to my car. I wanted to sit in the silence and process the fact that my mother was not just a mess, but a predator. Bella. The voice was soft. I stopped. Marlene was standing near the water fountain. Henderson had already left. She was alone. I turned slowly. She looked small. The cardigan seemed too big for her now. She wasn't holding the binder. She was wringing her hands. "I am sorry about the bankruptcy," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to do it. The debts were too big. Gordon said it was the only way to clear the soil for a new harvest." "Gordon," I said, "you are still listening to him. He is helping me," she said. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. She was an old woman who had burned every bridge she had. And now she was standing on an island made of debt and delusions. She took a step toward me. She reached out a hand. "Bella, please," she whispered. "We can fix this. I can withdraw the bankruptcy claim for your debt. I can find a way to pay you under the table. Just don't cut me off. I can't lose you. You are all I have." She had tears in her eyes. Real tears this time. "If you loved me," she said, her voice breaking. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't use a judge to talk to your own mother." I looked at her hand. It was the hand that had held mine when I was sick. It was the hand that had signed my name to a fraud. I thought about the word love. Marlene used it like a currency. She used it like a ransom note. "If you love me, you will let me hurt you. If you love me, you will pay my bills." I looked her in the eye. "Love isn't permission," I said. She froze. "What?" "Love isn't permission to steal from me," I said. "It isn't permission to lie to me. It isn't permission to use my identity to feed your con man." I took a step back. "I do love you, Mom," I said. "And because I love you, I am stopping you. And because I love myself, I am leaving." I turned around. "Bella!" she cried out. "Bella, come back." I kept walking. The sound of her voice echoed in the marble hallway, bouncing off the walls of the justice system. It sounded like a ghost story. I hit the elevator button. The doors opened. I stepped in. The doors closed, cutting off the sight of her standing there in her pastel cardigan, waiting for a harvest that was never going to come. I walked out of the courthouse and into the parking lot. It had started to rain again, a cold, steady Washington rain that washed the dust off the cars. I walked to my sedan. I didn't run. I let the rain hit my face. It felt clean. I got into the car and sat in the driver's seat. It was quiet. I looked at my phone. There was a notification. It wasn't a text from Marlene. It wasn't a call from Aunt Denise. It was an email from Joel Kincaid. Subject: Case status update. Do not ignore. I opened it. "Bella, I just got an alert from the court docket. The judge didn't just rule on your case. After the hearing, Judge Holloway forwarded the transcript of the testimony and the Northstone affidavit to the State Attorney General's office. There is a new case number appearing in the system. It isn't civil. It is criminal. State of Washington versus Gordon Price and Northstone Family Solutions. And here's the kicker. The trustee in Marlene's bankruptcy case has flagged her payments to Price as preferential transfers and potential fraud. They are going to audit everything. They are going to go after Gordon to get the money back. You didn't just get a restraining order. Bella, you tipped the first domino. Call me tomorrow. Joel. I lowered the phone. I looked out the windshield at the gray sky. Marlene had filed for bankruptcy to bury the truth. But by forcing me to court, by making me testify, she had inadvertently exposed the entire operation. My $4,000 was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the whole sweater. Gordon Price was going to be investigated. Marlene's debts were going to be scrutinized by federal agents. The machine was breaking. I started the car. The engine hummed to life. I didn't have my money back. I might never get it back. Marlene was bankrupt, and our relationship was a pile of ash. But as I put the car in reverse and pulled out of the courthouse lot, I realized something. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness. And for the first time in 33 years, the checkbook was balanced. I turned on the radio. It was just static for a second. Then a song cut through. I drove toward the highway, toward my townhouse, toward the silence that was finally, truly mine. Thank you so much for listening to Bella's story. It is a hard road to walk when the person who is supposed to protect you is the one you need protection from. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set a boundary with a family member that felt impossible? And I am curious, where are you listening from today? We have a community growing all over the world, and I read every single comment. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more realistic, gritty tales of justice and family drama, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for revenge stories. We have new stories coming every week that dive deep into the messy, complicated truth of human relationships. Until next time, stay safe, keep your passwords secure, and remember, love is not permission.